former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton. Ambassador, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Do you also agree and believe that terrorists are responsible for this plane?
Well, I think the evidence points in that direction to the extent we have it. I don't think we know enough at this point to conclude it definitively, and I'd like to know more, although I don't think we will, about what our satellites did not pick up. I don't think that's dispositive, but the fact they didn't see anything at least keeps the question open in my mind what the cause was.
Are you surprised we haven't seen any group take responsibility for this?
Not entirely. I mean, it's only 24 hours after the event, and I think the pattern is they wait a couple days. But if it were an organized terrorist attack, I would expect we'd see that fairly soon. My first reaction, frankly, when I heard about it, was that it was a repeat of EgyptAir, sad to say EgyptAir, but EgyptAir 990 about 15 years ago, when U.S. officials concluded that one of the pilots had taken the plane into the ocean east of Long Island. It sounded a lot like that. Obviously, we still don't know.
Yeah, and Dagan McDowell, you've been talking about the transparency out of Egypt yesterday and today. This is the third major issue coming out of this this country and even airline.
I'm curious to get the ambassador's reaction to this, but when the aviation minister came out yesterday and said terrorism as a possible cause, more likely terrorism, I thought that that was very telling, and it was a very different posture and stance than you would have, because they didn't even, they had very little information at that point other than there had been, because they kept saying vanished. Now I know we were listening to a translation, but rather than crash, vanished. But is Egypt, with President El-Sisi, certainly he's aware of the danger of terrorism in that nation, Ambassador. Are we seeing a different approach and posture from this nation in terms of dealing with terrorism? Because acknowledging it is a step in the right direction.
Well, I thought that was significant and some indication where they thought it was going, but there, you can see the biases here as well. Look, EgyptAir is going to take a body blow from this, whether it's a mechanical failure or terrorism. But what the Egyptian comments indicated tended to cast some concern on airport security at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, which is obviously a major hub. So in effect, they're putting at least part of the blame on the French, and I think that's something obviously that has to be investigated. There's still a lot we don't know, and I think it's important that we find that out because that'll tell us where we need to step up our surveillance and our precautions.
Jerry Baker.
Yeah, Ambassador, this is, as Dagan points out, there have been multiple incidents involving Egypt. We had the Russian airliner from Sharm el-Sheikh. We've had other incidents too, and again, although as you also point out, this plane left from Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. Although there could be all kinds of reasons, there could be other factors involved. It flew from, one of the interesting things we in the Journal reported yesterday was that it had been through multiple destinations. It had been through Tunisia and elsewhere. So it's had an interesting background. But it does seem to be that Egypt is the focus of so much of this terrorism. What should the United States be doing with regard to Egypt? Should the United States be offering more support to al-Sisi? Because of course we know over the last 5 years or so the United States policy under this administration towards Egypt has not exactly been consistent. What should the United States be doing if this is a terrorist attack to assist the Egyptian government in taking on the threat of terrorism both domestically and, as we've seen increasingly tragically, internationally?
Well, I think it's critical to give the El-Sisi government more support. I mean, I think our policy with regard to Egypt and in the Middle East more broadly since the Arab Spring has been extremely erratic and inconsistent. Egypt's probably the best example of that. But the fact is that El-Sisi has done more to try and suppress radical Islamist elements in Egypt. He's not a Jeffersonian Democrat, there's no doubt about that. But in terms of stability in the Middle East, I think he is doing the right thing. He's tried to reach out to the Coptic Christian population in Egypt, and I think his lack of response from Washington is one reason why he's turned toward Moscow to purchase arms, which is a terrible setback for American interest. So this should be an opportunity to stand with the government of Egypt. I doubt we'll do it.
Wow, you know, it's interesting. You make a good point there. So you think that this has been a cycle. I mean, one of the reasons that Egypt has pulled back is because the U.S.'s, behavior toward Egypt.
Right. I think if you go back to the original demonstrations against Mubarak, there was a period there when they began where the Obama administration in a 30-day period had 4 different positions on whether or not to support Mubarak. And what we've succeeded in doing is essentially alienating every major segment of Egyptian society. When we began, we had a military government under Hosni Mubarak. Now we have a military government under General El-Sisi that's significantly less favorable to the United States than it was 5 years ago.
All right. Ambassador, good to speak with you as always. Thanks so much for your insights, sir.
Thank you,
We'll
Maria.
see you soon. Ambassador John Bolton there. Before